Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so glad to join us today. I got John, the Godless Engineer, and we're just going to be talking about how Christians and atheists can have better conversations. So, John, thank you so much for joining me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. We're we're trying to get our house situation resolved, which we still haven't started moving or even started to close on our house. But we're starting to get a bit cramped in here with all the stuff that we bought to move into our house. So that's been a little crazy. And I'm just really excited to be here to talk about this particular subject because I really do want us to have better conversations around the topic of faith and religion and those topics, because I think those are very important for everybody's lives in general. And I would hope that we would strive to better these conversations so that we can be a bit more productive.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this conversation, and I'm so glad you joined me, John. Because I think it's so important. Just like how can we make these conversations better and fostering like good growth and understanding of like the other side. So what we're gonna do is look at different things. If you're looking for a debate, you showed up to the wrong show for today. Today we're just gonna have a good conversation and just talk about like how can we be better on each side. And I do want to say before we get into the issues, John, I do need to apologize to you because we did debate a few months ago, and I re-listened to my opening statement. And I just don't understand how I talk so fast. So I do need to apologize for. I don't even know what that was. So
No. You're perfectly fine. I mean, you had a lot to get through, so you did have to talk fast. But I mean, I had a little bit of issue like processing all the information. So I think that's just because I'm Southern, though. I don't. My mind doesn't really work all that fast.
I gotta play like the Northeastern City Boy card, because I gotta do that. So what we have today is like I drew up like 3 points on like how Christians and atheists can have better conversations. And I mean we don't really have a strict plan, so we'll just kind of go with the flow. But John, like before we get into these points, like what's kind of like your preliminary thoughts on like how can we have better conversations and like make this happen?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things that people can do to make it like a better experience in general and having these conversations. I think one thing that has really become very prevalent in at least in the online discourse is sort of this idea that you've got to dunk on the other person. Like you have to come out strong and I guess show that another person's an idiot or totally destroy another person in a particular debate. And if you don't do that, then it's somehow like not a good debate, as if having a civil conversation where neither party is there to convince each other, but is there to just have a conversation without any kind of like puffing of your chest or anything like that. Like, just coming there to have a conversation and to discuss, something without insults and without ad hominems, I think is really the main, at least my main focus for any discussion that I've had, because I've had plenty of discussions on my channel and on other people's channels where we just sit down and have a conversation over something, and I ask questions and they ask questions, and it's just a big learning experience for both sides, and everybody that even participates in the chat, they end up having like very productive conversations in the chat over different topics. And of course you're always going to have those people that just sit there and want to call the other side an idiot or something of that nature. But I really don't feel like there's anything to be gained over calling people names or wanting to try to show that the other side's just an idiot or something. I feel like the value of the conversation should be learning from each other and trying to understand the other person's position.
Yeah, that's really good. And something I've been thinking about recently is like everybody's a person. Like I think about like it's easy, like when you're listening to a video where it's like it sounds like, oh, it's this voice that's like trying to like destroy my beliefs or something. Or you look at like someone in the live chat that maybe doesn't have the nicest thing to say, and you're like, oh, this person is just a terrible person and whatnot. But like people are people. And like, I think it's one of the cool things is like we have like 8 billion people in the world, but we're all unique and have our different perspective on things. And just remembering the beauty of just like everyone is unique and just treating people like, like we would like to be treated, and it's just like, it's such a good rule to kind of go by, and just remembering just how valuable persons are in these discussions. And like, I look at someone like you, John, and I'm like, we disagree on a lot, but at the same time, like, we probably have a lot more in common than we disagree on, because like, we're both people who are dudes from America, and that's about it. But no, but like we have a lot in common, and I think just remembering these things is super, super important.
Well, yeah, and I've been able to cultivate really good relationships with people that I fundamentally disagree with on a lot of things. Like, of course, there's you. I think that we've got a rather decent, friendship, as it were. Braxton Hunter, he's another person that I've come to have this. I guess a very sort of professional type of relationship with,
Yeah.
because he'll review my stuff, I'll review his stuff, and it's just it's a good conversation, going back and forth. And there are occasions where it's hard not to take it a bit more personally than it's meant. And I think that is one of the things that a lot of people fall into, is that they take things very personally. And I don't think that there are some times when it's not meant personally, but some people take it personally. And then, of course, there's other times where people mean it very personally, and they make it very personal. And I think that it's at that point where stuff starts to break down, and we lose this I guess this personability between both sides, like just the personal interaction between one person and another person. And it starts to get to this point where people are I guess maybe treating the other person as if they're maybe not necessarily not a person, but like they're treating them as the enemy. And I really don't think that we should see either side as the enemy.
Yeah, no, that's super good. And that's one of the points I had written down, is like remembering like what it's all about. Like, Christians and atheists, like, we're not really opponents. Like, in a sense, like, I think God exists. You don't believe in God. You don't believe God exists. But like, we'd have disagreements, but we're really allies. If I think it like the way I think about it, because it's like you have a perspective, John, that I can never come from. Like, because I come in believing God. You obviously don't believe in God. It's like you have this unique perspective that I can't grasp as a Christian theist. I can listen to you and try to understand you, but like remembering just like you as an ally. Like, I was thinking about like we did that response video to Apologia yesterday, and I saw you were listening to a little bit of it, and like Paul, in a sense, like, yeah, we're responding to him and trying to like challenge his ideas, but like Paul's also an ally, and he's like he brings up really good points that helps me to think and become better, and like just kind of thinking about these things. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think Paul is a lot more palpable for the Christian side of this particular discussion than I am, obviously. But I mean, I know that Paul always appreciates people trying to discuss the different points that he brings up, because and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I know Paul all that well, but I feel like I've got a pretty good sense about him, and I know that he's always wanting his ideas to be challenged in new ways, because after a certain point, everything kind of starts to run together, and having new faces, new people bring up maybe the same arguments in different ways is kind of helps us maybe not attack it, but consider the proposition from a different angle. And I think that kind of thing is very healthy. And so I know for me, at least, I always love it when I see somebody try to respond to one of my videos, or try to respond to an argument that I have, because then it's like people are actually trying to take part in the conversation. And coming from the atheist side, when I first started, like, here on YouTube, I mean, I was very combative, right? I was the typical angry atheist, and I kind of look back on my start, and it's a little cringy to be
Mhm.
quite honest, as to how angry I was and everything like that, because I had it in this mindset that you had to be the guy that showed how much of an idiot the other side was,
Mhm.
and and just destroy them, like either personally or intellectually or anything else. Like I
Mhm.
thought that I had to do that, and but as I grew in my own ideas and
Mhm.
advanced my understanding of my own position, I feel like that kind of attitude towards it is just really detrimental to the conversation on the whole. And I can't remember where I started down on this particular
Yeah.
thought train,
Mhm.
but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's one of the great things of having just an unscripted conversation is we can just take it wherever our minds take us to. Like I agree with you, like coming from like the Christian like apologist perspective, like when I first got into like Christian like apologetics and like philosophy and these worldview questions, I thought it was like, oh, I need to go prove that Christianity is true. Like I got like the Kalam, and anyone who disbelieves in the Kalam is irrational. That's like having these like assumptions almost in the opposite ways you did, and like with these different arguments, like the resurrection case, like how can you be reasonable and disagree with that? Like that's like the perspective. Like when I first got into these things, like I came from that perspective almost like as the opposite end as you. Like the more I've like progressed and like done these conversations with like not only like interacting with Christians, but like also interacting with the people like you, like I've just learned to like appreciate the ability to disagree. Because like if you think about it, like there's people who know everything that you do, but then they disagree on this just the same topic, and it's just like just appreciating like we can disagree and both be rational. Like I have no problem with admitting like atheism can be a rational position to hold, because we all, for each person, like justification for what's considered like what's good evidence is going to be different. So if that makes sense to you, just like appreciating like kind of coming from like the super strong Christian apologetics into like the neutral of like where I'm still a very committed theist and very convinced God exists, like just being a lot more open in terms of like exchanging and like dealing with different ideas.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that what it ultimately does come down to is it's pretty much opinion based, because like I have the opinion that the evidence for God is not sufficient enough to warrant a belief in God, and of course you have
Mm-hmm.
the opinion that's the exact opposite. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that once people realize that it's really just oh well, I just have a different opinion than you, I feel like that takes a lot of the I don't want to say anger, but it's like the combativeness, the need
Mm-hmm.
to have this enemy in the conversation. I feel like it really just becomes like a difference in opinion, and it's okay
Mm-hmm.
to have different opinions. We have different opinions on everything all the time. Like I get the sense that you're very into sports, and I don't care about sports ball all that much. Like I know
I don't
enough
like
to
you anymore,
follow.
John.
Oh no, no, ruin the friendship, didn't I?
The relationship's over.
Well, I because like I
Mm-hmm.
know enough to understand, like I could follow along in a game of football or basketball or anything like that, but I don't
Mm-hmm.
spend my Sundays watching football or anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that it really just comes down to it's a difference of opinion, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the religion topic is in much the same way, but thinking about it, you see the same kind of I guess enemy mindset when you
Mm-hmm.
compare it to like things like sports or even politics, because
Mm-hmm.
especially politics now, I mean what it boils down to, with the exception of the really crazy people that are out there in politics, it really just comes
Mm-hmm.
down to, well, this person has an opinion that leans towards the right, and this one has an opinion that leads towards the left. And then you got people that are just very steadfastly in the, oh, if you believe anything other than me, or other than what I believe, then you're the enemy. And that exists
Mm-hmm.
on both sides of the spectrum. And the same thing goes for the religion discussion. There are people that think that, oh, unless you believe the exact same as me, then you're the enemy. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the mindsets in both politics and religion that we kind of need to steer clear of.
Yeah. thinking about sports, my dad and I would watch like MMA fighting from time to time, and there'd be like these professional guys who would be fighting, and then they just like beat the crap out of each other for like 15 or 20 minutes or something like that. And they're fighting, and then the fight's over, and like after they just like made each other black and bloody, they hug each other, and they're like, we're friends, and like they're fighting for tens of thousands of dollars. And I remember I had this thought one time watching one of these fights, and I'm like, why doesn't it feel like Christians and atheists act that way towards each other? Like, we're not punching each other or fighting, we're just engaging ideas, but like a lot of times it feels like, well, it seems like people just hate each other on the opposite sides. And it's just like, it seems like to me like to be such a lesser degree of like investment than like fighting in terms of like you're physically like putting everything on the line. And obviously like religious claims or maybe not, or atheistic claims have very high levels of significance on them, but like why can't we just be friends and like agree to disagree? And like there is a truth out there. Like I don't think either of us would be like relativistic where it's like, oh, God exists for you and God doesn't exist for me. Like obviously there's a truth out there, but like we can disagree and like still like each other, you know? Like you don't have to agree with everything I believe to be friends.
I totally agree, and I think that this is one area that a lot of atheists, I feel, have to deal with, maybe more so than a lot of religious people, because like, especially down here in the South, being an atheist, I don't have a lot of atheists that are around me. Most people around me are religious, and so you have to, at least somebody in my position has to figure out a way to sort of still maintain those relationships with religious people, and not be so and not be so combative to where you destroy those relationships. And I think that somebody from my position, which I mean, when I first became an atheist, I got treated pretty horribly, by people. In fact, a couple of family members decided that they didn't want to stay connected with me, like on Facebook or anything like that. And so like they unfriended me and everything like that. When I kind of was espousing this new worldview that I'd come into, and so. Not that that's a good reason to be sort of an angry atheist, but after that point, I started to calm down, and you can see it in my content. Like if you go back on my channel and you look back, you'll see me being very angry, and then slowly over time, I get to this point where I'm not really trying to be this sort of an angry person and just always on the attack. And I think that that's one thing that a lot of people need to understand about this conversation is that you don't always have to attack the other side. You just the way that I put it is just be that voice out there of opposition, but it's like a respectful opposition. There are times when I'm not so respectful, but typically that only comes when somebody is, I guess, very disrespectful back to me, which is kind of is almost a tu quoque type of fallacy. It's like, oh, well, they were mean to me, so that means I can be mean to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I feel like at some point one side has to be the bigger person, in that, and try to take the high road and not engage in that kind of I guess schoolyard mentality. Like just for instance, recently I attempted to have a discussion or debate with a Catholic. He's the Canadian Catholic here on YouTube, and I ended up having to leave the debate just because we were having a discussion, and I might have been a little bit more. I'm trying to accurately, because I wasn't like combative necessarily. I was just I was just having like an easy conversation where I felt free to just sort of be myself. And at one point he just immediately starts getting combative, and I ended up having to leave the conversation because I'm not going to sit there and allow somebody to, disrespect me like that, to change the conversation from a nice, peaceful conversation about these ideas to just sitting there trying to berate the other person. And I tying this back into where I started, I think that cultivating those relationships between a religious person and an atheist has to include both sides at some point, setting aside this combative nature, or this need to attack the other person, and just have a conversation like you would about anything else, and not be so angry about it. And I feel like when people starting out in this particular vertical on social media or in their life, when they're really focusing on like religion and the big questions of whether or not God exists or anything like that, I think that there's this sort of intrinsic need to be a little combative, but I feel like we're in a good position, like me and you and Braxton and other people are in a good position to set a really good example of having conversations like we're having right here.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Even though I'm just trying to pull up the live chat here, your wife wants us to fight, so I don't know about that. But let's go. But besides for that, like, ignore what she said. I'm just kidding. But like I think about like the abolition of, like, this is gonna be a weird like comparison, like the abolition of slavery. Like, in the past, like, a lot of people were for slavery, and it started with a few people, and a few people were just trying to make a difference, and that spread to a few more people, and like ultimately, like, we reached this point, like, where we, like, everyone in society realized, like, we made this like tremendous moral progress where we're like, yeah, slavery is wrong, like, this can't happen. And then in a similar way, like with these like Christian atheist dialogues or Christian Muslim or Muslim atheist, like, it's one person at a time. So like if you and I can make that like kind of like commitment to like just like being respectful and have better dialogues, and like the people listening to this can make that same commitment, like, we can make a difference. It might take a little bit of time, but over time, like, the dialectic will improve. So yeah, I'm totally on the same page with you there.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm quite surprised by the amount of vitriol like that I've personally seen whenever I've gone on to like a Christian's YouTube channel or had a discussion with other Christians, because I mean, whenever I'm there to have a discussion or a debate, you would think that they would want to present the best demeanor that they could, because they're supposed to be representing, Jesus or Christianity, or because I mean, at least that's what I was taught, like, as a Christian. Of course, after my Catholic days, because I was a really bad Catholic, as in, like, I didn't really know the faith all that deeply, which I figured out this past weekend on one of my live streams. But as a Christian, I always had, let's see, this is probably going to show my age, but when I was really into like Christianity, it was all the mantra was, what would Jesus do? And just having that, I guess, perfect role model of Jesus constantly in my mind, like, well, what would Jesus do about this? And I can't really understand why there are so many Christians that are in the very like debate bro type of mindset, where where like, if you don't agree with them, then you're just an idiot. They speak to you, they speak down to you, they're condescending and everything like that. And I mean, I'm not trying to act like atheists don't have that toxic section of the community either. We definitely do. I guess I'm just a little bit more surprised that Christians also have like a sort of a toxic community. I don't know. Have you experienced that, like, either on your channel or on other people's channels, of like Christians that are just, I guess, toxic is the best way to describe them?
Oh, most definitely. Like that's definitely something we experience. And like there's like this argument against like theistic belief called like the moral meager fruits argument, where it's kind of like that the gist of it is like, well, if Christians have this like special revelation from God and like they should be like morally superior in a sense, like they should be doing the right things. But constantly we see Christians are no better than anyone else, and oftentimes they're worse than other people. Like if you look at like the horrendous things that like Ravi Zacharias did. So like I totally like I see that and I'm like, it really does disappoint me. Because I think it's very easy to just be rude online, and it really hurts me when I see that when I see Christians being, especially on like our own channels when atheists are like just being rude. I'm like, that's like I wasn't even trying to quote the golden rule in the beginning, but like I just implicitly said it. I was thinking like love your neighbors, you love yourself, and I was like, oh no, I'm not trying to convert John in this show. No, if you want to become a Christian, if you want to become a Christian today, John, I'm here for you. But like I was thinking like I wasn't trying to, but like that's such like Christians, like we fall short so often in doing that, and like that's like our golden rule is to do that. So I think you're pretty accurate, and it makes Christians look really bad when we don't do that. So I think you're dead on.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not. I don't want anybody to take like what I would have said here, as like I said before, that I'm not recognizing the toxic portion of atheism. I think that atheists also don't need to be so abrasive or combative, and I personally struggle with that all the time. Like either whenever I'm recording my videos or I'm in like a live chat or something like that, which it's been a lot easier lately because I guess maybe just with my age I've calmed down a good bit.
What are you, like 25 now? So
no, I'm actually 36. I'm old, but just I struggle with myself in trying not to be like angry and everything like that, because like me personally, I have a lot of problems with condescension in people like being condescending to me, and so like that's kind of like one of my triggers, I guess, for just being an asshole. And sorry, I cursed on your channel here, for being a butthead. And so sometimes I will just go directly into that whole butthead mindset, and I just don't even realize it. And that but of course that's why I have my wife Casey to calm me down on occasion. But it's so easy for that to flip in somebody. And so what my point is that I recognize it even in myself, that I struggle with it sometimes, and I think that everybody can struggles with it at one point or another. And so I think that the more that we can get a handle on that, I think the better conversations we can have.
I think recognizing your own faults is super important. So I appreciate you kind of like sharing your own little journey, and like it's so important in recognizing like just like what we get wrong, because we get a lot wrong as human beings. And if you think about like the crazy things that humans have believed in the past, it's like, well, what are we believing today that's crazy? Like I'm sure there's gonna be these things a few hundred years from now, though obviously not theism, John, where it's like, how did people believe that? And it's like, I think that's so true, and I'm glad you thought about, because like recognizing your own biases and our presuppositions is super important. So yeah, I agree with you. So do you want to move on? I just talking about like listening to the other side for a moment. Is that good for you?
Okay.
So one of the things I thought about is just listening to the other side. Like listen, like I was thinking as a Christian, like I benefit so much from just listening to atheist videos. Like I probably at this point I benefit from it more now than I do listening to Christian videos, because I know a lot of like the Christian arguments that like, at least like the not like high level ones. So just like listening to the other side is so important. And to me, like you make a lot of response videos, and I make a lot of response videos. But like if I was a Christian, if I am a Christian, like Christians shouldn't just listen to like my responses to atheists and be content. Like they need to listen to the atheists, and like you should read the atheists, and hopefully like for the atheists, like read the Christians, listen to the Christians, don't listen to like just the responses to them. So I think that's super important. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, I think that it's definitely important. Like right now, I'm currently in the middle of reading Randall Rouser's "Jesus Loves the Canaanites."
Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, well, I'm starting with it, and of course, I was a little, I get not really harsh, but like I read the introductory chapter, and I made some comments about it, and of course Randall wasn't happy with my comments about it. But
Mhm.
I'm committed to reading his book and getting to the position that he actually pushes for, to see
Mhm.
what how he argues for it, because that's one of those topics that I'm really interested to see how Christians
Mhm.
deal with it, like these the harder portions of like the Old Testament, and
Yeah.
maybe some of the harder verses in the New Testament, seeing how Christians can reconcile
Mhm.
them,
Mhm.
one way or another. And of course, to pick out like what videos I'm going to respond to or make videos about on my channel, I always have to listen to the Christian side of things. And I
Mhm.
actually find myself not listening to a lot of atheist content, just because I guess I feel like I don't want to taint my own view of that. Like I want
Mhm.
to listen to the argument and then see if I can figure like to see if I can figure out if I agree with them, or if I don't. If I don't, why don't I agree with them, and then try to explain that, explain why it's not convincing. And instead of like watching somebody's argument and then watching another person respond to them and be like, oh yeah, that's good, I'm gonna steal that,
Mhm. Yeah.
kind of thing. um but I mean, that's not to say that I don't like listen to other atheists about different arguments. I mean, when I first became an atheist, and I was looking into like the different arguments, and then the responses to those arguments. I mean, I read I read a lot of different people. Like I've read a lot of Bart Ehrman. I've read a lot of course, Richard Carrier. But let's see, Hitchens is another one that I read a lot. Which, I mean, honestly, the Hitchens and Dawkins and Dennett and all of them, I don't know. I feel like a lot of them are not necessarily outdated, but
Mhm.
a lot, like I feel like there's a lot better examinations of the
Mhm.
different arguments now than
Yeah.
there have been in the past. And
Mhm.
so I definitely encourage people to listen to both sides, and try not to get into try not to get into an echo chamber where you're only
Mhm.
listening to what you want to hear.
Mhm.
I know from personal experience too that it's difficult to hear like somebody respond to one of your videos,
Yeah.
because like Braxton and Jeremy Despain,
Mhm.
recently they reviewed my video where I reviewed one of Jeremy's videos. And I mean, it's difficult to listen to somebody go through it and talk about how wrong you are and everything like that.
Mhm.
But I feel like you can come away with either a better understanding of how to communicate your message, or a better understanding of how the other side sees your argument, and
Mhm.
or sees your position. And I feel like that kind of clarity can help you regardless of what side you come out on.
Mhm.
Because I don't want anybody to think that I think that the only good side to come out on this is like being an atheist. I think
Mhm.
that as long as you honestly investigate what you believe and why you believe it, regardless of the side that you came out on, I'm just happy that you've honestly investigated what you believe and why you believe it.
Mm. I think it's so cool, like thinking about like we are, and not necessarily in this video, but like when we're looking at like arguments for God's existence, or like maybe like Christianity or Islam, like we're probing like the fundamental nature of reality, especially like with like philosophy and like arguments for God. Like we're really looking at like what's at the foundation. Is there a foundation? And like is there a reason to think it's a God rather than like something else? Like I just think that's so cool to think about, like just the appreciation of discovery and like the beauty of discovery. Like it's so cool. Just thinking about just all the different things that like you and I can investigate, and like your perspective. Like I talked about this earlier, but like it's just so helpful having like people like yours perspective, because like I was telling you, I listened to some of your videos today, and like it's very helpful to listen to the other side. And like I look at like thinking about like, let's say like I'm going to present like a cosmological argument. I'm like, okay, well, I know, like, here's what I believe. Well, how would John respond to that? And like, what objections are there? And just kind of like making it my own journey, not saying like prima facie, like, oh, these things are just obviously true. Like, except, you know, like we need those like properly basic beliefs, you know. Well, like, you know, like it's just obvious. Like someone in the live chat was like, how can you be logical and like deny basic facts about history, like the crucifixion of Jesus, like saying that towards you, John. And I was like, that's just kind of silly, because like, yes, obviously, like it seems to me like we could do a whole debate on like the historicity of Jesus. Like it seems like, yeah, he existed, but like it doesn't make John automatically irrational because he's not convinced by those arguments. Like, so I know I'm a little scatterbrained here, but it's just like recognizing we can have different opinions is so important.
Yeah. And one of the big things that I've noticed is that whenever I guess whenever somebody, you know, comes at me with on that particular topic, typically I can't really ever get them to pin down what I actually think about it, because like it's not that, like, for instance, with either the historicity of Jesus or the crucifixion or resurrection of Jesus, I'm just not sufficiently convinced of those things, right? And it's not such a hard line, definitely didn't happen. It's more like I'm not convinced by the evidence. And
so can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah.
So like, how does it feel like when someone's like when you're not convinced by like the historicity of Jesus arguments, when someone's just like, well, John, don't you know that all the scholars disagree with you and you're just irrational because you're holding this position? Like, how does it feel when someone's just like prima facie just like ruling you out?
Well, I mean, you know, it's pretty it's pretty defeating for one, just because of the fact that it's like they're not even considering any of my arguments. They're not considering how I came to the conclusion, and they're just agreeing with you know, the scholars that he existed, and then saying that I should at the same time believe the same thing as the scholars do. And the problem with that is that I think that arguments from authority aren't convincing. I feel like you have to argue from evidence rather than from, you know, just what everybody believes. And I guess at first it hurt a little bit more, like whenever I was in a discussion, than it does now, just because I've heard it so much. But you know, if somebody's willing to just write me off because I don't agree with the consensus of scholarship on that particular thing without actually examining my arguments, then I guess I could just let it kind of roll off my back, and and try not to let it bother me so much, because they're obvious. I feel like at that point the person's not in the conversation to have an honest conversation. They're not an honest interlocutor, because instead of listening to what I have to say, they just want to, you know, make a grand pronouncement because I don't agree with them, you know, on the onset. So it's a lot easier to deal with now than it was when I first was very outspoken about being a mythicist. But I'm kind of curious. I'm sure that you go through kind of the same thing, you know, with, you know, somebody that you know, an atheist, presumably, that would take the exact same position, like on the resurrection or anything like that. I mean, how does it make you feel whenever they just write you off, you know, instead of examining your arguments?
Yeah, so there's actually this great moment in our debate. I don't know if you remember this. We did a debate a few months ago on Tart, and we both posted on channel, so you can find this. So we did the whole debate, and we're in the Q&A, and one of the questions is like, it was to me, and it was like, Zach, how does it feel, or like, what do you think of like all your arguments just being like appeals to ignorance in science or something? There was something along with the questions was like, and I got really frustrated. Like I try to stay pretty like level-headed throughout talking, but like I was just really frustrated with that question, because I'm like, did you listen to like what I was actually saying? Because like that's not just what my arguments are. And then you ended up speaking up for me, John. You're like, yeah, this isn't like, I can't remember the exact moment, but you're like, yeah, this isn't true. Like this isn't what Zach did. And I was like, oh wow, we can be friends here. But like I feel the same way as you. Like when we're misrepresented is like we have these like punchlines, and it's like, it's just so, it hurts when you're misrepresented, and it just feels like we're not like when that happens, we're not making any progress, you know? Because ultimately, like, you know, this is a journey where we're asking these questions and exploring together. And if we just want to stick with these punchlines, which go both ways, then like what are we actually accomplishing rather than maybe like making ourselves like feel good?
Yeah, and I mean, I do remember that in that debate, and that's one thing that I was thinking about earlier was that I hate that I hate that like I can't interact with somebody without
Mm-hmm.
somebody else like calling the other side an idiot like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or just claiming that they're ignorant. And I thought in that debate that you had a very well thought out position, and
Mm-hmm.
I felt like both of our positions were pretty well discussed and thought out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I hate to see somebody be written off just because they have a different opinion. And
Mm-hmm.
I I don't know if this is just like a recent thing for me, just because I've calmed down or whatnot. But you, I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I hate seeing people write Christians off as just being ignorant on the
Mm-hmm.
outset because they're Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And or because they think one argument is a good argument for God. I have I have a lot more interest in understanding why an argument convinces a person rather than focusing on the fact that they don't agree with me about the argument. And I think that a lot of people let that slip past them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super good. And I'm trying to think about like where I was going to go with that because I appreciate your point, John. Can you just repeat your last sentence because I had a thought and I just totally lost it.
Um, you're asking me to remember what I just said.
I'm challenging the Southerner,
Works my brain. I think that it's more important to understand why an argument convinces another person rather than focusing on the fact that you just disagree with them on a point.
Oh,
like you have
yeah. I think that's I understand what I was going on. Like you're dead on and like trying to like understand the other side, like because I feel like a lot of times Christians will be like, well, like John, it's Romans 1, like that's why John's an atheist, like duh, like and like we can talk about like the implications of like what that passage means, but like that's just not true. Like I think about like the atheists I know personally, and then just like interacting with like people like you, like it's not just like this thing of like, oh, they just hate God. Like they actually have like reasons for why they're an atheist, which are like not just like hating other people. And I think the same thing could go with like Christians, where like sometimes like Christians are characterized of like, oh, they just have like this silly faith and there's no grounding for it whatsoever, and da da da. And we can talk about like is like what makes a belief rational or something, but like just like write like the entire group off as irrational, like prima facie. It's just like that's not a good way to have conversations, because like if you have this big picture of like everyone on the other side is irrational, like I often think like you might be the one that's irrational. And I say that to Christians too. Like if you just think like all atheists are irrational, like I'd really challenge you to check what you're thinking, because there are very thoughtful atheists out there that really have a very coherent worldview, including John. So yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
Well, yeah. So I feel like an important question that should be asked, like in all these discussions, is the why question. Like if you have somebody that's like, oh, Godless Engineer is irrational and all this, it's like, well, why is he irrational? What exactly makes him irrational? And really probing why somebody considers another person irrational to determine if you think that person is being irrational. And to speak a little bit more to that, I think that a lot of people like start making very broad statements about a person in conversations, because like they'll take like for instance, you can consider my position of mythicism to be irrational, but that doesn't make me on the whole an irrational person. It just means that I might be irrational about this one thing. And I think that that's something that a lot of atheists out there fall into a lot of the times, because you'll have somebody that at the most extreme, it's like they just consider all Christians to be irrational all the time, no matter what. instead
Mhm.
of like just picking apart like, oh well, it's a little irrational to believe this, or it's irrational to believe that.
Mhm.
Instead of making it about the topics, they make it about the person in general. And I don't think that that's a great way to cultivate these types of conversations. It's a great way to make enemies. It's a great
Mhm.
way to sort of other people outside
Mhm.
of what you already believe. um, and I don't think that it's a great way to actually advance the conversation. That seems to be like somebody that doesn't want to consider their own position all that deeply. They just want to write somebody off
Mhm.
on the outset so that they don't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's super great. And like, there's this common like cheesy Christian tagline where they're like, "Check your heart." It's like check your heart about why you're doing what you're doing. Like in a sense, I think that's true with like what you're saying. Like we should check our heart. Like why are we interested? Like if you're a Christian, like why are you listening to this video right now? If you're an atheist, why are you listening to this video? Like why are you listening to the videos you do? Like what is motivating you? Like are you trying to like probe the deep questions of reality and try to like get a deeper understanding, listening to different opinions? Or are you just trying to find like places where you can get a gotcha on the other side and get some easy points? Like I think that's so true what you were saying, John. Like we really need to think about like why are we actually like thinking about these things? And at least for me, like it started off with like, oh, I just need to prove that Christianity is true, but it's evolved into like I just want to know it's true. And like I'm very convinced that Christianity is true, but I'm willing to ask any question and I'm willing to listen to anyone who has a different opinion than me. And like I really appreciate like anytime now people make responses to me, I always enjoy them because it's always good to hear from a different perspective.
Mhm.
So yeah, just like check, hashtag check your heart, John. So
Well, I'm kind of curious. Do you ever run into because I know this happens to me on the atheist side of things, but I'm wondering, do you ever run into like Christians that treat you very toxically for whatever belief that you might have that's different than theirs?
yeah, so it depends. I'm not super active on social media now, but I think the more active I am on social media, the more I'll run into people that are like, "Well, Zach, you're just crazy." Like, like there's this whole debate on like presuppositional apologetics, and one time I was like critical of it, and like I was just told like, "Well, if you don't accept precept, you're just illogical," and like I don't think precept works. Like it's like you have like a man-centered view of yourself that are like all these different things. So I've definitely had these experiences where it's like I'm told like even by my own group, so to speak, that I'm being irrational and like you can't do this. And it's like I don't know. I mean, I get the precept like you're borrowing from the laws of logic. You have to borrow from my worldview thing, but like I don't know. It's just it seems like a very harsh way to come across when you just immediately like even when your own group just painting them off as he's just irrational.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and I mean, I actually have people that I only ever see comment whenever I get something wrong or I say
Mm,
something wrong.
yeah,
uh, or I misspeak. They will.
yeah,
They're the first ones in the comments to be like, actually,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so it's kind of weird because on the one hand, it's important to listen to critics like on your own side, that,
Mhm,
that are criticizing some kind of position that you have, right?
mhm,
But it's very important to understand who to listen to and who not. And I mean,
mhm,
this doesn't necessarily only have to apply to like whatever side you fall on in the discussion, because it could come from the opposing side on it, not
mhm,
to try to fall into the whole enemy mentality there, but just the opposite opinion.
mhm,
And recognizing when to listen to somebody and when not to. See, for me, uh, the way that I discern between the two is whether or not the person is genuinely trying to help me, or if the person is just trying to bolster themselves. Like a person is trying to show off how smart they are, and so they
yeah,
have to
mhm,
pull one over on you and act like they're all superior and be condescending and everything like that. There's that kind of attitude, and then there's the other kind of attitude where it's like, well, that this particular fact isn't exactly correct here. It's better explained like this or something like that. Like somebody that's genuinely trying to help you. And so I feel like in order to, in better conversations, you're looking to help each other instead of trying to show how much better you are than the other person.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great way of putting it, because at least like now, like when I think about like my like the responses I'm trying to do now, it's more of like not just being like, oh, here, like I just exposed this person is, like I caught them on saying this thing that they probably didn't actually believe, but they just like misspoke. But the more like just kind of like building in like engaging ideas and like making each other better. Like I think about it like like sports balls analogies here. Like when I practice against someone, like I'm competing against like someone in like a basketball practice, say, like I'm trying to beat them, but at the same time, like there's the greater goal in practice of making each other both like better players. And like, like we can engage on these different ideas and disagree and really like exchange and challenge each other. But at the end of the day, like hopefully it's done with the goal of making each other better and really just trying to like see things from maybe a new perspective or a greater perspective or something along those lines.
No, I totally agree with that.
So we are like, I don't think we had a time, but I mean, we've been going for like 50 minutes. Maybe like one question for you, John, is what do you think, what do Christians most often get wrong about you? And then I'll answer this question in the opposite direction. And then what do you think atheists get wrong? Obviously, it's this broad category, so it's hard to speak for everyone, but what like generally in the atheist phenomenon, what do they get wrong about Christians that you think needs correction?
Well, so I think what a lot of people get wrong about me is that I'm, I guess, ignorant. A lot of people try to write me off either because, at least on my channel, I'm a bit more vulgar than some of the other atheist channels out there. I like to have a lot more fun in my videos, at least I feel a bit more comfortable in my own videos, cracking jokes or having a lot more fun. So it's a lot easier for them to like just dismiss me because they don't. I guess I get the whole bottom of the barrel type feel, I guess, for them, and so they just automatically write me off because I'm not just straight to the point of I guess the videos that I make. I like to have fun with it, so they just write me off. Now, as far as what atheists get wrong about Christians a lot of times is much in the same way. A lot of times I feel some atheists just write somebody off completely because they're either simply a Christian or they are convinced by one argument that the other person doesn't find convincing at all. And, I found myself realizing that like, I was a Christian at once, at one time. Like I believed all the same things that like you believe, Zach. And I just so happened to, change my opinion on that. And that really makes me not so different than you in that respect. I mean, we can be different in plenty of other ways. Like the people out there that thinks the blood of Jesus will protect them from COVID-19. I feel like it's just it's a bit more than just a difference of opinion at that point. But for the topics that the philosophical topics that we're talking about, I came to realize that like, look, they have a different opinion than me, and that's okay. That they don't have to have my opinion, but I feel like what we definitely do need to do is treat each other with respect in a conversation, which again, I struggle with sometimes. And I recognize this in myself. So I know that I can point out, these flaws, even if I also have those same flaws.
Yeah. So answering in the other direction, thinking about like what do atheists most often get wrong about me? And I think a lot of times, at least like for myself, like I'm 20 years old, I get painted off as like this naive kid that's just like hanging on to like what his parents believe. And like that can get applied to Christians more broadly. Like, and I think it's interesting because like some of the people that have challenged me the question the most are my parents, who are Christians. Like they've been very encouraging of me and everything to really just engage and challenge and discover, like own my own journey in a sense. So I think just like understanding that, I feel like that often gets painted on me that I'm just like this naive kid that's just trying to defend his faith to the last breath and da da da. So I think that's, but then in terms of like what do Christians get wrong with atheists, I think Christians love the term new atheists. Like we were talking about like you're talking about like Dawkins and Dennett and Hitchens, like these people, like the four horsemen of new atheism. And we love, I think Christians a lot of times paint them off as like, well, that's all atheists, where it's like these people who don't actually care about philosophy and they just lack a belief in God, which I think is totally a fair position now, by the way. It's like, oh, we shouldn't take them seriously because they're not actually engaging with these ideas. And I think that's just such a terrible way of doing things as a Christian. Like, I think each person has their own perspective, which is super valuable. So I think it's probably something Christians get wrong a lot, is just painting everyone as like this new atheist that's just doesn't care about philosophy and just lacks a belief in God and all these things. Like, I think we get that very wrong about atheists, and a lot of people won't take those people as seriously as they really should as human beings who are equal. Like in the Christian perspective, we're all equal people made in the image of God. So yeah.
No, I was just gonna say. I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, I think those are things that do happen, and I definitely don't agree with just writing you off because you're young. Although I do try not to respond or I guess debate anybody that's like really young.
Yeah.
I kind of not really suckered, but I did that one time and I felt a little uncomfortable with it. But I feel like writing anybody off for their age in any kind of sense, I think is I guess it's a little intellectually lazy, because it's better to look at why a person believes, which I know I've said this plenty of times in this discussion, but understanding why a person is convinced by something or why a person believes something is better than just writing them off at the very beginning without listening to what they have to say. Because, I just think that it's better to understand,
Yeah, no, that's super great. And I think that's kind of a great place to kind of start to wrap things up, is just don't write people off. Like we're all human. We all have these same limitations where we're stuck in this world, trying to figure out what's going on here. And just appreciating that, like, we all have different perspectives. And because of those different perspectives, we're going to come to different conclusions. And we should respect that, but also be concerned with truth and pursuing truth. Because obviously somebody's right. And, we should try to figure out who it is. So, John, we are around at the end. Do you have any kind of like last thoughts, things you didn't get to say before we start to wrap things up here?
I mean, we did cover a lot here. If anybody is still watching at this point, either in the replay or even right now, I hope the one thing that you would get out of this entire discussion is that it's better to have productive conversations and understand where the other side is coming from, rather than getting a cheap hit in, like rhetorically or in any other kind of sense. Understanding your interlocutor's side and understanding why they believe what they believe and how that relates to your own personal position, I think is the best way to get the most out of these conversations that are, people are having all the time online. And I think that if we can turn the tide on the toxic, portions of both communities respectively, I think that, we can definitely, have better conversation. I think that we can definitely, start to, maybe not move in the same direction, but just move in a cooperative direction. I mean, we're still on two different sides of this thing, this conversation, but I feel like if we can, start moving in, together, like as far as the conversation goes, and understanding each other, I think that that's the best way to build these bridges and
Mm.
remain friends,
Mhm.
like we are. I mean, obviously we're not the best of friends or anything, but I
No, we're
do
best
like to
friends.
think.
We text each other every night and like talk about like what we ate for dinner and all these things.
Well, I mean, I like to think of you as a friend. Like I think
Mhm.
of Braxton as a friend. Like whenever I make a video, um, responding to Braxton, I send him the video beforehand, and just to let him know that I'm making the video, and we have these very nice conversations between the both of us. I mean, I don't. I've packed his book, but I've got his core facts book,
Hmm.
and so I started reading that, and then I got busy with other things. But I've read Braxton's book. I'm reading even Randall Rouser. He doesn't really like me all that much, but you
Hmm.
know I'm reading his stuff, and I try to positively interact with him. And even when you had Eric Manning on the other day,
Hmm.
you know I try to have positive interactions with him. And I mean, there are times when I'm very contentious whenever
Hmm.
I talk to him, and he sometimes he takes it as me being a lot more contentious than I mean it to be, which I mean, it's kind of hard to communicate emotion on Twitter in
Yeah.
however 180 characters or whatever.
Hmm.
But it with Eric, I try to have good thought-provoking conversations with him. And I mean, I don't think that he likes me all that much either, but I still like the way that he comes at things. I like watching his testify videos, and seeing how he understands things, because you know I just I don't know. I can't ever see myself agreeing with his assessment, but I
Hmm.
also know that a lot of people have his opinion about
Hmm.
things like the Gospels and stuff like that. And it's always interesting to understand, or it's interesting to understand why an argument convinces somebody. And
Mm.
that's the most interesting thing that I think that I think comes out of all these discussions.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think arguments can be super person based. But yeah, I hope this conversation can advance the dialectic because I think like I was talking to you like off stream, like I was thinking about probably doing a response to one of your things that was really interesting. You said in a video recently, and like I see these as opportunities to really grow and explore and kind of advance ideas rather than just trying to be like flag stomping, and I don't even know it's a phrase, but like just like chanting victory from the hilltops and saying we destroyed the other side. So I think this conversation can be super beneficial in terms of just, let's explore these things and just enjoy this journey. And we're allies, not enemies. So, yeah.
I totally agree that we should definitely be allies, and more so than enemies. So
Hmm.
I agree with you there.
And I do consider you a friend, John. I forgot. I have to add that in because, you said that. So sweet. I feel honored. You might be my first Southern friend. So that's always nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're at the,
We're not all rednecks down here, I promise.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that. I'd have to come down there and see.
It's like, I don't know, Gleason, your face is looking pretty red right now.
I haven't been to Alabama, so I have to check it out myself. So yeah. Well, if you don't have anything else to add, John, where can people find you and see your content and such to wrap things up here?
Oh yeah, I mean, y'all can just search me up on either Twitter or YouTube as Godless Engineer, and you can find me over there. I mean, I always appreciate somebody coming in and giving me some kind of argument against whatever I'm saying, which I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about one of my most recent videos.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll definitely be watching that. But definitely come look me up, Godless Engineer. On Facebook, it's Godless Engineering, which will get you both a group and a page there. But yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Mm. And if you're new to this channel, I always encourage you to subscribe. Appreciate you checking out our content and doing all kinds of fun interviews and conversations and responses and hosting debate from time to time. And if you do that and you enjoy the channel, you can become a patron at patreon.com/apologetics. Support for as little as $1 a month. But John, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully for you and for everyone else listening, it's been really fruitful, and it can be the continuation of a journey.
Oh, definitely. I know I definitely enjoyed this conversation. So thank you so much for having me on to discuss these topics.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who tuned in. Thank you, Jesus, Susan, Andrea, Caitlin, everyone else. Jeremy said to say to John, I say hi. So yeah, he's there. But yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good one, and we will see you next time.